Today, I'm just going to try to at least help everyone overcome fear. And I think the way to do that is just to understand what we are up against as a landlord. And so, my goal today is in the first half of the class, we are jumping into the landlord investor class. It is called Teaching New Investors How to Get Started. And so when we are looking at the three investor classes, if you missed the first one, we're gonna go over a few of the things that we talked about in the first class just to get you up to speed. But I would encourage you, you don't have to take these classes in any certain order. It's all good information. And I am just super excited that everyone is here and hope that that this class gives you the courage to jump in because it's going to be good stuff. So, just as an overview, the first class, Learning to Work with Real Estate Investors, is really looking at an overview of different investment types and how people get into real estate investing. And that's a great class to take, even if you just want to work with investors. Y'all, it's official. Investor season is back. And I'm just super excited about that. And we're going to talk about the numbers in the beginning of class, because I figure if you can understand not only how easy it is, but how profitable it can be to start real estate investing, then the rest of it won't seem as difficult because the return on investment is crazy. And so, when we're thinking about truly like why to invest in real estate and whether this is for you or for investors that you want to work with, we're going to be talking to several different types of people today. There are some of us in this class that don't have any rental properties. They've never had any rental properties, but they want to have rental properties because who does not want passive income before you wake up in the morning to have enough money to pay your bills? And then, I'm not saying that we should stop working, but at least we're working because we want to work and not because we have to work. And so some folks are just getting started in that fashion, but you've been in real estate for a long time. Some people on this call are from corporate America, maybe still have your corporate job, but those of us from corporate America know, good luck to us as far as thinking that, our 401k is going to cover retirement. And if you still have a job where you actually get retirement from your job, like a government job, then good for you. But of course, most Americans don't. When we look at the rising interest rates, that are going on right now, it's super important when you're talking to investors, or if you're just thinking about jumping in yourself, to think about, as interest rates go up, as inflation, of course, we're being consumed by inflation right now. What type of investment can you have better than real estate that's going to keep up with the market? Even the stock market, and y'all, we all see what's happened. I mean, it's higher than it's ever been. But, there's a lot of market fluctuations. And if you're like me, if you've invested in the stock market before, I'm a little concerned at this point, just because so many of the numbers are really disconnected. Used to be able to look at stock prices and they would somewhat relate to earnings, but in so many areas, that's just not the case anymore. So whether you're looking at investing in real estate for passive income, or just to be able to have a retirement fund, or be able to put children through college, be able to sell a house if you ever have some huge opportunity, or to move into the house of your dreams, the time to get started is now. Real estate is not a get rich quick scheme. It is definitely a long game, but it is totally worth it. And so, sometimes we have to really get into the thought pattern first of being an investor. And when you just think about your day-to-day activities, we all feel comfortable doing what we're familiar with. And so my goal in this class is that you're going to feel extremely familiar with the entire cycle of purchasing a home, and whether you're going to move into it, which I would suggest that you do. And we'll talk about my story and how I got started in a moment. But whether you're going to move into it right now and then rent it, after a year, and then you move into another house, or if you're just going to buy it for an investment, like just use an investment mortgage for it, or if you're going to pay cash for it. Regardless, we have to get our thought patterns right. And I always say, Michelle, get your mind right, get your mind right. Because, sometimes when we have a huge repair or something that comes up and we're at Home Depot at 4:30 in the afternoon and we're checking out and it was something expensive, maybe it's, $725, to do a repair at a rental home, that can it seem very overwhelming if we're just focused on that. But if we're focused on our entire return on investment that we've made, then and we're looking at the depreciation that we're getting to write off our taxes and how much money we're saving every year, along with the equity in the house going up, then it makes it easier to be in the investor mindset. I think one of the important parts that we'll talk about several times today is not only your mindset, but really getting in touch with yourself and saying, am I cut out to do this? One part of the lifestyle choices of an investor is you've really got to be a save and invest kind of person. There are borrow and spenders and save and investors. And y'all, we're not born that way. We can choose, and we can choose to change as well. And sometimes delayed gratification is not nearly as great as the party or celebration going on right in front of us. However, I can say now, looking in the rearview mirror, it's been totally worth it. So, it's certainly not a get rich quick scheme, but it does work over time. So the way that I got started as a real estate investor over 30 years ago now was, you can tell this is this is a CD audio course because I could find this picture online, but I actually have the cassettes. But it was an infomercial, and I was in corporate America in medical sales. And I had just gotten a statement for my 401k that had gone down like $800. And then my neighbor was moving out. I had a townhouse at Midtown Square, on Piedmont downtown. And my neighbor was moving out. I go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know you guys were moving. And they said, yeah. And I go, well, if you don't mind me asking, how much did you get for your house? Because I know they've been going up in value. They said, well, actually, we were renting. I go, what? And so when they told me that, I just thought, wow. And then they told me how much they were paying. They were paying $1,200 a month for rent, and my mortgage was 808. And I thought, why wouldn't I just try to do this after watching this infomercial? So I did get the cassette series, but what happened is I just put my condo or my townhouse in the paper the next day. And hey y'all, that's when we had to list, rental properties and stuff at the Atlanta Journal, when everyone got a paper newspaper to actually read on Sundays. But I put it in there, had a lot of interest, and actually was able to rent it to a program, the Phantom of the Opera, coming to the Fox Theater, because there wasn't enough room in the hotel across from the Fox, but they only wanted to rent it for 6 weeks. But they asked me, could they pay me for 6 weeks up front and pay me 1.5 times what I was asking if I wouldn't mind leaving, just light plates, dinnerware, and a few beds there, and they'd be really low maintenance. So I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. So so I moved, bought a house, and right before the closing, the folks that were living there, it was an estate sale. And when I went over just to, do a walkthrough, just ask them when they were leaving, then they asked me if they could raise their own rent and stay in that house because they were in there last year at Georgia State. And so, so I thought, oh my gosh, absolutely. And there was also a tenant in a garage apartment at that place. So then I bought a condo at Virginia Hill. So y'all, all of this happened within a 2-month period. I was in medical sales, going to hospitals and going to surgery with urologists. And then all of a sudden I was a landlord with 3 tenants in 8 weeks from watching an infomercial. So I do want to encourage you. You don't have to know a lot to get started. I always like to throw this part in too. Y'all, this is the house. It's in Woodstock. This is the house that I grew up in. And I certainly didn't, I've never gotten a silver spoon. The last time somebody gave me money, I was 16 years old, and my parents bought me a $200 Bel Air that had rust all over it, but it did drive well. And so I just want to encourage you, no matter where you're starting from today, it doesn't matter. real estate's for everyone. And this is one of my favorite things about investing. It doesn't matter where you are right now. Everything can change. If you've got debt, we're going to talk about ways to pay that off. But y'all, so much of this comes back to mindset. Sometimes, when we're thinking about thought patterns, we have to really think about, what are our financial obligations every month? We certainly have fixed bills like our own mortgage, a car payment, childcare, credit cards. And really, if I were to reduce it down to one sentence, it would just be, we can either play now and pay later, or pay now and play later. And I just want to encourage you to do the latter. And, does that mean that you might be watching Netflix instead of going out on Friday and Saturday? Yes, it does mean that. However, what you can also watch is YouTube videos on how to paint, cut in, do light electrical, light plumbing, and it make a difference. Because, when I was getting started in investing, all of what I learned, because I started doing a lot of the work myself just to make the return on investment higher, and then hiring contractors, of course. And back in the day, I had to go to Home Depot classes. So they had a big board up with how to tile, Saturday at 9:30. And so I would go, and then I would just go home and try it. And so I just want to encourage you, the things that you don't know, this is certainly the information age, which we all know, but all of us are able to watch a video and try to do it. You know what I mean? It's not like we're doing heart surgery. We're just talking about houses. And if we mess up, then we can just fix it. So always feel free to call me. I love to talk about stuff like that. Like, what do you think? But we're also going to talk about in this class how to be frugal, because we have to make good decisions when we're purchasing rental property. We're not making the same choices necessarily that we would make if we were buying a house to list back on the market to sell for the highest price possible. Just because with tenants, we're going to have to change the paint, the carpet, a lot of things going along the way in what we're going to try to do to set us up for long-term passive income. So some of the things that we're going to talk about in this class are also, when is the right time to buy rental property, and what makes me say this, what makes me say right now, hey, it's investor season, we're back on. And, when you can talk about that to your investors, then it's going to make a difference. And when you're excited about it, then they'll be excited about it. We'll talk about some of the landlord school of hard knocks, because I think sometimes when you hear the worst case scenario, then for me personally, that makes me feel a little safer moving forward, thinking, well, if that's the worst thing that can happen, then maybe I'll give this a shot. Also, the time value of real estate investments. And look what I put at the very last, because it's nobody's favorite topic, but managing tenants. And I do want to be sure that everybody knows I've been a landlord for over 30 years. And it's not saying that all tenants, y'all, I've had some of the best tenants ever. I mean, I've actually had quite a few tenants purchase homes that they had been renting from me for a long time. And so I think a lot of the mistakes that I made earlier were just not screening enough, and just not having my narrative right, and maybe even not having my courage up to really, be very clear when we are interviewing tenants, how to try to get to the best people. But we'll talk about that in the second half of the class. This is from the first class, but I want to remind everyone, how do we define a great investment? So for the purpose of this class series, we're going to define investor A. So when we reference investor A, it's a person that flips houses. And it doesn't mean that investor A also can't be investor B and be a landlord, but it just means that investor A opportunity is to flip a house. And so for an example, purchasing a home for $250,000, it needs $100,000 renovation to be worth $450,000. And so investor B, and that's who we're really focused on today. It is the landlord. And that is, for the example that we're using today, we're using a $300,000 sales price, and maybe just minimal repairs if possible. And then to be able to get $1,600 a month in rent. And so it could be any example. You can change the numbers, but I just wanted to be consistent. So when we are referring to them as we're going forward and getting all jacked up about the return on investment and you being excited about moving forward, then it's better if it stays consistent. Investor C. So, y'all, this is what I did. And I just want to encourage everyone on this call to just prayerfully consider at least being investor C. And the reason is because number one, it means that we get to have a primary residence loan. Investor C moves into the house, and then after, 6 months, a year, you do any light repairs that you have to do, but you're living in it. So you can do it on the weekends or at night or whenever you have time, and then rent that house out because you've only got 5% in it, and then repeat, buy another one and move in. And so the way that the way that I did this when I first started investing is I had some of my favorite like large canvas pieces of art, maybe that I'd gotten from TJ Maxx or Marshalls. And so I would fix the house up while I lived in it and put that great art out. However, I knew I was going to move. So the things that I didn't look at all the time, like, scrapbook albums or anything like that, y'all, I left that in boxes. Okay. I mean, just if you're going to get on the plan today, just don't stress yourself out by getting totally unpacked in there, because you know that you're already going to start looking for a new place within 6 months or, hopefully at the latest a year. The point is that the same house is not a great investment for investor A, B, and C. Does that make sense why the same house would not be a great investment for all three of those people? When you think about investor A, when we look at that example, you just go, oh, okay, I'll take that one because investor A says that there was a house purchase for $250,000. The investor put $100,000 in it, and now it's worth $450,000. Okay, so the gross, of course, income would be $100,000. So who would think that's a bad idea, or who would not want to be investor A in that scenario? Well, I can tell you who does not want to be investor A in that scenario is the person that does not have $100,000 to fix up the house. And you also can't get a mortgage to flip a house. And even if you do get a mortgage, and if you do it twice, like if you hold a mortgage and then, sell the house in 3 months, 6 months, you may be able to do it a second time. But after you do it the second time, there's a flag on your credit report. And when I say that, I just mean that any loan officer that looks at your credit report and sees that you only had a mortgage for 3 or 6 months, they're going to say, yeah, not so much. We're not going to do that, because it literally costs, of course, the mortgage company money. And so we're going to look at investor A for just a moment. And we really looked a lot. We really went deep into investor A in the first class. So I would encourage you to take it if you didn't, if you're interested in being this person. But just to separate it in your mind, because we're going to be focused on investor B today, the great news is sometimes you can be investor A to get the money to be investor B. Because I work all three of these opportunities, especially early on, just so I could create passive income. And so, when we're looking at just the breakdown of what investor A would make on this, it's $82,000. But, there's a lot to say about investor A. One is there's no passive income being created. It's really just like selling real estate, commission, 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 except you're having to work with contractors, and you have to walk into houses like this and say, I love it. And so I bought this house in June this year, and this is what it looked like. Investor A, the reason I bought it actually was my son is 21 years old, and I just wanted to show him how to flip a house. So we did this project together, mommy son time. It was awesome. And so, but the transformation begins. You can see, that when you see the picture on the left side, It's like, are you a person that can look at it and say, okay, I can get a floor and decor and get the tile. I can, go to Home Goods and get this mirror. I can do, what is it that you're going to have to do to make it marketable? And then, if it doesn't sell quickly, when you're investor A, that's another great thing about being the landlord investor B. When you're investor A, you need the house to sell quickly because you've got so much money in it. I mean, if you've borrowed from a hard money lender or paid cash for it, 250, and then put another 100 in it, y'all, unless you want to refinance and take cash out for this house, it really is not eligible for investor B. At this point, you have to sell it. So y'all, I literally, because it had been on the market for 2 weeks, which is like 2 years in this market, right? So I took my furniture out of my house and moved it over here and sat on the floor for 3 weeks. It did go under contract the next day after I did that. But just know, at least with investor B, you really don't put yourself in that situation where something has to happen right now. I do just like to go over this. And by the way, thank all of you who wrote questions after our last class. I tried to answer a lot of those in here, and this is answering one of the questions that I got. What are the considerations and tax considerations when you are that investor A and you're flipping a house? One is, how long will it take you to renovate it? If you've got a day job, if you've got small kids, if you have other time obligations, you have to think about what's your opportunity cost. And, even if it's family time, but if all you're giving up is binging on Netflix, then why not do that? And so the other part to consider is short-term capital gains. And of course, this might change in a few weeks, in the new year. But for right now, it's I used 30% capital gains tax. And so that $82,000, that was the 100 minus commissions, and then any seller concessions. And now we just took another 30% off of it because of capital gains, because I only had the house for a few months. And so look how fast all of that money, almost half of it, went away. So I just want to encourage you, if you've got any kind of capital loss to write off, that's a great time to think about, like, if you've lost money in the stock market or lost money on something else that would be considered, capital gain or capital loss, then it's a great opportunity to flip a house because you can offset it. But, I would always plan for $10,000 over budget in renovations, just because that can happen. And, it is really hard sometimes to find good contractors that will stay there through the whole project. And so investor A summary is really just, that it is a viable side hustle. But y'all, do y'all understand what I'm saying about it's really just a day job though. You're just flipping houses. You're not setting yourself up for long-term passive income. And isn't that really what we all want, just to build wealth? And if you're only investor A, it's really just like going to the office every day, because you're just getting that one. It's just like getting commission. You have that one deal and then it's over. So, the other part about flipping houses is, being a landlord does not take that much time once you get used to it and you get your tenants in houses. But flipping houses, it does take a lot of time, and it's a constant day job. It's also good though for if you needed a new car, if you wanted to pay off debt, like after this class today, you might be thinking about that. Well, that might be a great opportunity to flip a house and just pay your debt off. Yes, it is hard work, but the more work you do yourself, the more you'll make and not have to pay contractors, and the easier it'll be to get debt free and get in a position to become investor B and C. And one other thing about flipping houses is it does give you documentable income to qualify for a mortgage to become investor B. And we just need to remember, investor A, while it's a great short-term opportunity, it's not really the long game, like what we're talking about today. And so, y'all, when we're thinking about why we are separating these investment strategies into different investor A, B, and C, it's really just to break it down so that you can see yourself as one of these investors. Because y'all, if we're in real estate, there's no reason for us not to be aware of how to change our lives and the lives of our children forever. And I will say, when I started teaching this class in 2005, y'all, there are so many success stories from our agents. One agent she jumped in, bought 9 rental houses, put 2 kids through college. I mean, I love listening to her story. And I know I wrote this on one of the emails, but one agent just bought her second rental house since the class in October. So I just want to encourage y'all. That I go, oh my gosh, you're so high courage. Congratulations. And she just said, well, gosh, after the information shared, like, how can you not jump in? And so that's what I'm hoping to do today as well. And these are some of the goals and just thought processes and questions I think we all need to ask ourselves to get started. And one is, how much money do you have to invest? And even if you tell me you have less than $5,000, it doesn't matter. And we're going to talk about how to maximize the money that you do have. But, how much do you have? If you have your money in a CD or in a bank account, if you've looked at it lately, that's I can't even believe they call that an interest rate. It's laughable at this point. What is it, like 0.000125? But it's crazy. And another part is, how much money do you have that you're not going to need for an emergency fund? Because that is one thing about being investor B, is just that the money, while you could be a multimillionaire in equity in home value, that doesn't mean that money is in the bank. So it's really money that you're taking off the table. I like to think of it as 401k ish, because it is certainly setting you up for retirement. And then, I would just start thinking through this class. Once we go through the numbers, if you're a person that's got $40,000 that you could do something with, my guess is you're going to want to jump in, and which is very exciting. But ask yourself also, how much work will you do yourself? Okay, how much work will you do yourself? Because, just because I can tile floors, will I tile the floors though? And so because your own schedule and what kind of time you have. And so the reason that you need to ask yourself these questions is because it's going to affect your return on investment, and that leads to impacting what kind of house is a good idea for you to purchase, is if you will do some of the work yourself, and how much will you do. Do you want to be a landlord? I mean, you might have something, you may have a bad experience or know several people who have had bad experiences as a landlord. And sometimes it's hard to jump in the game when you've heard horror stories from other landlords. We're going to go through some of those today because, I think taking them head on and talking about those scenarios, you being prepared for that, and being prepared with your narrative, and being prepared with your thought process you're going to have when it happens to you, then I think that it'll make it a lot quicker just to overcome that, and just get back in the lane and going toward the passive income. Is rental overage important? So does anybody here, we're going to go into questions right now too. So does anybody here know though, why would rental overage not be important to somebody? Because wouldn't you say, well, gosh, if I'm going to be a landlord and my mortgage is $1,600, if my mortgage is, $1,600, then I would of course want to get at least $1,600 for rent. You know what I mean? So why would you not think rental overage is
Because
important?
of depreciation and all the write-offs against your active income.
Y'all, it's my co-host, Belinda Cook. I'm so glad you're here, girl. Y'all, Belinda's been a very successful investor, and she's 100% right. Okay, y'all, when you have corporate America clients, or you're in corporate America, or your spouse is in corporate America, the thing is, you may not want more income on your tax returns. You're putting this into rental property to somewhat be a bank so that other people can pay off your property. On the other hand, some people find rental overage extremely important because they're trying to get to a place where, let's say that your mortgage is $1,100 a month and your car payment is $400. What Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, still my favorite investment book ever, says is that puts you out of the rat race. If your rental overage or investment income covers your monthly expenses without you having to work, then that is defined as getting out of the rat race. So just remember, there's people on both sides. So we don't want to just assume if somebody was $200 short. Okay, so let's say that you were getting $1,600 in rent, but the mortgage payment was $1,800. Okay, we're going to go over the reason that that will be less important, but I just want you to drop a pin in the fact that when investors start coming to you, which they will soon, when investors start coming to you, don't just assume that they have to cash flow on the rent, and don't put those properties aside. One other positive reason is if you think that an area is transitional, then I mean, basically for only $200 a month, if that was what you were short, as far as being under the amount that you get for rental income, basically after a year, you've got $2,400 while this huge Walmart, Home Depot, and all this stuff is being built across from the place that you just bought. And then then you sell it or move someone in. But just remember, there's a lot of reasons. We can't just assume that everyone has the same mindset as an investor, which is what we are really talking about today. Here's another good reason. So we're all familiar with tax brackets, where we pay a certain amount. If we make this much money, it goes up, for the next bracket, it goes up for the next bracket. We're going to look at today ways that being investor B as a landlord can actually lower your tax bracket. And I would venture to guess that for most of us in this class, our highest bill every year is income tax that we pay the government and the IRS. And so being able to impact that is, certainly not cheating at all. It's only using the laws as they're written. But owning rental property is a great way to lower your income tax liability. So we will be jumping into that. But isn't it something when you think about that, really, though, just when you think the difference in what you would be paying? I mean, Belinda, you've been an investor for a long time too. It's just, what would our tax returns look like without depreciation now? It's scary. I know. And so, think about, what do you want? The rental deductions, the rental overage tax deductions, pay off debt, financial freedom. I mean, it's okay to pick all of the above, but I would just say, as we just went through all of this getting set up to launch into what we're going to talk about as far as return on investment. Okay, y'all, we're moving. Okay, so let's talk about, we are going to be zoning in on investor B and investor C. The reason is really investor C turns into investor B, but I like to have it in a separate category because investor C makes it impossible for anyone on this call not to say, I can jump in, because y'all, we can all move it. We can all come up with 5% down and purchase a home. And if you really think about it, I mean, you could use an FHA loan, move into the house, with 3% down. And then, your commission is 3%. So then how much do you have in it? But even using a conventional, which I would strongly recommend, with the 5%, we're going to actually look at the numbers. But when we talk about renovating a home, I just want to clarify that, when we're making the decision to be a landlord, even if we're moving into the house, we've just got to be careful, because what really impacts our return on investment is the amount we have in the house, not the amount that we're trying to make up and overcharge in rent. We just have to be extremely careful and just really get the most bang for our buck when we're deciding what we want to exchange in the house and what kind of upgrades we want to do. So I just wrote down some of the best return on investment upgrades that I have done for over 30 years. Lighting, definitely. Ceiling fans, if there's not some in maybe a few of the bedrooms, if the ceiling fan is making a noise, take it down and put up a new one so that you're not over there repairing it all the time. And the last thing, y'all, that any of us want are tenants that, hear a creak in the ceiling fan night after night after night, because that just puts a pebble in their shoe, and they're living in your nice home and you want them to take care of it. And a way to do that is just to spend as little as possible, but to make your rental home stand out and make the tenant feel appreciated. Blinds, another place I like to say, don't ever spend in blinds. You know, it's very likely that you're going to have to replace the blinds as time goes on, just because, if they yellow, or if there's stuff on there, or if dust has gathered on there for the whole, time the tenant has been there for 2 or 3 years, a lot of times you just have to replace them. And so folks that get committed to expensive blinds, it makes you want to take them down and go out and hose them down and then put them back up. But y'all, that never works out. Has anybody ever done that? It's terrible. The water spots, you just never come out. Value carpet, nice pad. I like to encourage people, y'all. Okay, so maybe you like to tease yourself. I do not. Okay, so what that means is when I go look for carpet for a home that I was either moving into or that I'm going to use for a rental home, if you step on a carpet that is $15, a yard, and then you step on the one that's $45 a yard, and then you step on the one that's $80, then all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, is the $15 one, is that like indoor outdoor carpet? No, it's not. It's because you are stepping on the other carpet. There's no reason for us to even be stepping on $80 yard carpet, okay, in rental homes. We don't need to see what the differences are. We're just really trying to give the tenant a nice new paint smell, new carpet, a nice pad. I mean, we certainly don't want indoor outdoor carpet, inside, but there's just a lot of great ways that we can make a huge difference. Like even getting framed mirrors. My favorite place to get framed mirrors is Ross when they have them, because they're even less expensive than TJ Maxx and Marshalls and Home Goods. But those are my favorite places to get framed mirrors. I keep somewhat of an inventory going in my house. So if I see them on an end cap.
Hey, Michelle, you got muted accidentally, I think.
Oh, gosh, y'all, I mean, I really gave the secret sauce just now. I mean, I'm just kidding. but framed mirrors are a great way. And then tile or LVT, and for kitchen and bathrooms. And this is just an example. And I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, look at this luxury bathroom. What I'm saying is it only takes $700 if you do the work yourself. And by the way, you can't see this, but on the other side of this cabinet, you could actually see the ground. This is a house that I moved into. I moved in, by the way, while you could still see the ground. I just thought, well, you know what, I'll fix it up as I live there. But this is the way, that it breaks down. I didn't take these Formica countertops off. You can actually create a porous surface with mastic, what you use behind wall tile. You can create a porous surface and then just put tile right over the top of it. This is just paint. I got that nice satin paint to put in here. And there's my framed mirror that was around $18. And so, the thing is, it doesn't have to be brand new stuff. It just has to be all put together. A lot of times we'll see things like in the basement, see like these blinds down here. And this is a house that I bought, and you see the mold in the basement because they had a roof leak. Y'all, it doesn't matter if it's in the basement. We really can't there's a great way to get mold off. You'll find out as a landlord. It's just using Clorox and warm water and just put it in a sprayer and spray it on, and it takes the mold off. But also just repaint and paint the shutters if you're going to keep them, or just get new blinds. Because look at the difference. Like, what if I had only painted, or didn't paint the shutters? Because we all know painting the shutters is awful. Y'all, look at these. Even and like I say, none of these are saying, oh my gosh, can you believe it? Don't you know the tenants felt lucky to live here? But do you know where both of these houses were that I'm showing you right now? This was in a college town. It was in Tempe, Arizona. And so I was renting to college students. I would get 4-bedroom, 2-bath homes with a pool. So I had 4 different, people in there, and of course had all of their parents co-sign for them. But this is fine for college kids. They really don't care. And now if I was going to sell this house later, do you think that I would have taken the paneling down instead of just kills and painting it? Of course I would. And I would put sheetrock up in there and make it look fabulous and redo the floors, but not to rent the house to college kids. So, what are investors usually looking for? The two main types of investments are quick appreciation, and then also cash flow with little money down. Finding a property with both can be somewhat of a unicorn, but it is possible. When you are looking for a property in any city, this is what a lot of you wrote me about after our last class. So I decided just to do a big section on this. And Belinda, I'd love for you to jump in if you want to unmute when I'm going through this, just because you've really gotten properties in different areas too. And I know that you've done some in Athens, which is, fabulous. And so one of the things to look at is, what is the current rent amount when you're looking at, like, one great place is rent.com. So if you just go to rent.com on your phone, you can just pull up any city in Georgia and it'll give you all of these, actual homes for rent. And you can see the average amount that homes are renting for. And then you just compare it to the sales prices in that area. So as a seasoned investor, I can tell you over time, things that I would look for is I want things that are close to me now because I have a day job. When I had my son, I wanted things that were closer in proximity to where I lived. Previously, I was willing to drive up to an hour to get to them. But even when I would do turnkey, if a tenant would leave and I had to get a new one, then, driving an hour each way. So just think about, what is your own personal desired perimeter? And then one of the first things to look at, and please don't take for granted that the FMLS is correct, is we need to confirm if there are rental restrictions in that subdivision. Because if there's rental restrictions, then there's no way that you can be investor B or C in there because you're not going to be able to rent it. Property
Michele,
tax.
I'll just quickly jump in for anybody
Please.
who's got a child who's getting ready to go to college, once they've decided where they want to go to college, even if, you're renting to somebody else's college student, it works because you can put that towards paying for the rent for your college student. But in certain college towns, I started out in Athens. I love Athens. They used to have banks in Athens that would make investor loans that were just as good as, and if your child was living there, it was even better. You've saved money for your kid to go to college. It didn't cost me anything to send my daughter to Georgia. Her roommate paid for, all the extra stuff. Of course, we had Hope at the time, but those are things that are just so important. But you've got to know where in that college town to buy.
Right. And I love what you said, Belinda. Even if you have kids that are coming up on going to college, even if it's 2 or 3 years away from right now, y'all, 2 or 3 years from now, we can all watch the news, the current news. And the breaking news is that interest rates are going up. So, it's the same house. You're just going to pay more for it when the interest rate is higher. So, going ahead and looking at it and getting familiar with the area, I couldn't agree more, Belinda. I love what you're doing in Athens. It's such a great idea. And that seems like such a great place anyway. It's reasonable. And just by the way,
the owners of the investment, if they're all college, they're all student rentals. So you're not 100% just about of them are. So you don't have as many problems if you get these investor loans where they're familiar with that. And because there's no 20% owner occupied in these college condos up there. They're all students or grad students or, whatever. So you have to find your good lenders who'll do that. If you're going to make a loan, get a loan. I think Michelle's muted.
Hey, I don't know why that's happening. I think really when you are looking at those properties, Belinda, too, you're just thinking about, gosh, when you can get 2 or 3 parents to co-sign for your daughter's roommates, hello. How many evictions would you have? Like none,
You have
So
no vacancies basically because, there's a set pattern from when everybody puts their rentals out there for rent. We put them out in February. They
mhm,
don't move until August and they're well rented all by then. You've got everything taken care of and there's a waiting list of people hoping that these people won't move in or whatever. So, and sisters, brothers, I get repeat, family people that say, oh, my daughter lived there, blah, blah, blah. Now I want to live there. It's just an easy breezy thing around
that's
some of
awesome.
these college towns.
Well, y'all, I know Belinda had a lot of follow up too, after our last class. So I do want to let y'all know, that that Solid Source is on the Athens board. They have a different MLS there, and so if you're interested in that, then just contact Derek and he can add you to it. There's a fee to it because they charge like per agent per month, but you can jump on and jump off. So you can get on it while you're finding real estate if you're interested in doing that, and then just terminate it when you're done.
And just ride around because in some of these areas close to campus, I mean, right on campus on the UGA bus line, I don't list it anywhere but put a sign in the window with my real estate number and license number. And within a day, I've got 50 calls. I mean, you don't have to, so for sale by owner, people do the same thing. You're probably not going to find the better ones listed just because we don't have to. At
That's
the
awesome.
homeowners meetings, people decide, I always ask at the homeowners meeting, anybody want to sell? Because I've got a list of doctors who are just itching to buy.
That's awesome. Well, and and like I said, I'm not trying to say that that we don't want to make the home nice for the tenant, but college students have very low expectations.
And there's homeowners associations where they don't want the dues to go up because everybody's an investor. We want to take care of the main things. Nobody wants to make it, put a swimming pool and landscape the yard.
Exactly.
You're just not doing any of that stuff.
Exactly. So another consideration is property tax. So those of us who have um, previously or currently live in the city of Atlanta and in Fulton County, I know you feel me. It's really hard to make things work when property taxes are just extremely high, along with even HOA, very high HOA fees. One of the things that I look for when I'm looking for investment property, and this makes me purchase a home faster than anything else. Okay, it's a transitional area, and you can see it usually reveals itself. And y'all could just be driving around meeting a client to show a house or something, and you see this huge lot of land being cleared, not in a subdivision, but like on a side road. And then all of a sudden, in a month or so, you see that Walmart is going in, Home Depot, Starbucks, people that will do a lot more investor research than any of us will ever have to do. But what we are 100% sure of is if Home Depot or Starbucks or Walmart is going in there, they are 100% sure that the population is going to go up. That is why they are building there. So I would just encourage you, if you see land being cleared on a road that you take every day, this example for me was in Woodstock. This was, I'm trying to think of the year, it's probably around 2004-ish, and it was on Highway 92 between Roswell and Woodstock. And all of a sudden on the left-hand side, I see just all this land being cleared. I'm like, what's going on? And so I called the planning and zoning committee just to ask, what was going on. And they said Home Depot, Walmart was going in. I was like, oh my gosh, y'all, I bought 2 houses that weekend. I bought one new house in Woodstock, and then one that was just right down the street. The reason I would do that, of course, is think about the people that just want to live near their job, even, because there wasn't really that much going on in that area. It was just a blank area on Highway 92. So I just want to encourage you. One great way to find property is just when you're driving around, look for land that's clearing. And the call to planning and zoning, that's a free call, and they will give you any information. So I would just say, pick up the phone and just see what's going on in an area near you if you see something happening. This is how we would look for a property in any city. When I moved to Arizona I'm from Georgia, but when I moved to Arizona, if it was bizarre because I was selling my property in Georgia. So at that time, I had 5 rental properties. It was right after the Olympics. I got started right before the Olympics were announced. And so I was doing a 1031 tax-free exchange for my 5 rental properties to move to Scottsdale, Arizona. But you remember the 1031 tax-free exchange only gives you 45 days after you close to identify the properties that you're committing to close on within 6 months. So anyway, that was a really that was a crash course for me on how to find property in any city since I had never lived there before. So we're just going to talk about, we don't need to be concerned, even if you're new to Georgia or you have clients that are new to Georgia, it doesn't mean that they're not eligible to invest. These are some of the things that it doesn't matter where I'm investing. And these are not hardcore rules. And, would I ever get something that was on a main road? Well, maybe, if the price was right. But can I tell you why I put these things in here? That to say that I avoid these personally when looking for investment property, it's because it just takes more time to rent. I have to talk to more tenants every time I rent the house. If it's adjacent to commercial, if it's on a main road, and they have kids and don't want the kids on the main road. If it's that's funny. I'm making myself laugh. The high theft area. Now, I mean, I sold a place one time because I had an air conditioner stolen, 2 new air conditioners stolen. And this is just hot news on the side, but you can actually get an alarm now for your AC. If the AC part that's outside. And so that's what I did. I put a cage alarm on it so it would notify the alarm company, but still it did make me sell it. High HOA dues, because y'all, that can just stick it to our ROI, and that is completely out of our control. This sounds silly, but I just really don't like to have to do a U-turn to get into a subdivision of a house that I'm renting out, because I hate it. I mean, I don't even like to do it, period, but I certainly don't want to try to rent a house with it. And then definitely above ground utilities on the property, just because why would you do that? And like I say, I'm not saying that these kill a deal, but y'all, we live in Georgia. There's so much opportunity. Our property taxes are so good. Why would we get things that are going to make every tenant? Why are we going to just put all of this time demand on ourselves every time that somebody is moving? So I like the easy button. And like I say, not to say that there couldn't be some kind of unbelievable deal on a house that had one of those things to avoid. But in general, those are the ones, if I can see it. One of the ways that I save time and gas, like we were talking about earlier, is when I see a place that I like, before I'm going on showing time to go look at it, I Google Earth everything. I Google Earth, because you can just see a lot more on there. And so it'll tell you what's close to there, because it may not seem like a big deal. And sometimes, when you see, because you just say, was it really that bad to be adjacent to commercial? Okay. What are the exceptions? Yeah, if you're like downtown Alpharetta, I mean, you're right there in the middle of stuff. I'm just talking about in general, because that commercial can turn into a rehab. And of course, we love rehabs for people and happy that people go there. But do you want tenants to, move in with their small children there, and then have to change them out every year just because you chose the house? So these are questions to ponder as you're moving forward, because we're going to start looking at some numbers. And when we're looking at the return on investment, if we are, and when I say fortunate, I would certainly say what is par for the course. But your year 1 return on investment should be your worst year, because you had to put the down payment down. I mean, you had to put the down payment down, move in, do whatever you're going to do to get it into turnkey, easy shape. So when new folks are coming in, that you don't have to do the heavy lifting every time. So really year 1 should be your worst ROI year ever. And so we're going to look at that. But also, do you expect it to increase in value? And so has anybody in this class, does anybody have duplex or triplex? Okay.
This is Billy. I'm purchasing a quad closing at the end of December. It already has tenants in 3 units.
That's awesome. Really. And did you know too, that a lot of primary residence loans, if you're going to move into either, like a duplex or a triplex, a lot of times you can still do the 5% down as long as you're going to be in one of them. And I'm a big fan of those. But let's ask this question. Sometimes the quads um, go up in value significantly. And sometimes that might be something that increases in value, maybe at a lower rate than a transitional neighborhood, as people are coming in and getting, these old houses that were built in 1970s, and then just putting these monster beautiful houses on that street. However, who makes the most money in rental overage? The quad. That's another reason. Remember, we were saying earlier, do you want something that's going to have quick appreciation, or do you want great rental overage as soon as you get started with little money down? A quad, a triplex, duplex, a lot of times those have the best ROI, like as soon as you get them. And for anybody on this call that does not have small kids, or you're under 25 years old and you are able to get up and move, you're going to get the hardest time from me today if you don't jump in. But why wouldn't you guys get a quad or a duplex? Because just like Belinda's daughter, a lot of times, if you get that primary residence loan and then you move in, the tenants in the other 2 or 3 units are paying for yours, so you're living for free. And it's not saying when we get a primary residence loan, it doesn't say that we have to live there for 5 years. It's just, it's owner occupied, and we do have to move in, but there's no time limit on it. And so there's another though, as well, is how much will I pay in taxes this year? Y'all, that's another reason, like land clearing, when I bought those 2 houses in the weekend in Woodstock. Another reason that I will buy a house, and one of the reasons that I was doing that this year with my son, is because I have a capital loss to write off. So it's good to have a capital gain, because if you have a capital loss, you can't write it off of standard income or dividends. It has to be, capital gain that you write it against. There's, understanding what we're talking about right now. I mean, can you imagine being, at one of the Christmas parties that you're going to be at this year, and then somebody's talking about any of the topics that we've just been discussing, and then you jump in with some of this information? I mean, they're going to want to buy investment property with you. I mean, it's super exciting. And when you're excited about it, it gets other people excited about it. So just to remind you, the example that we are using today for investor B and investor C, but investors B and C, is a $300,000 sales price and $1,600 in rent. And so one of the questions in the chat box, gosh, how do you figure out what is that number? What is the number? Because what we're saying is you can buy property in any city if you know this information. So we're just going to look at investor B versus investor C regarding mortgage. Okay, y'all, we have Francine from Not Mortgage with us today on our class. So I'm so excited that she's here, because she'll be able to answer even more in-depth questions if you have them regarding the mortgage for both of these investor types. So just remember, investor C is the person that is going to move in. And y'all, there's so many, I can't even tell you how many primary residents that our agents have purchased this year. So I know a lot of us have been moving, probably just, of course, to profit, on the increased value of our home. But just remember, if you're going to move anyway, okay, I'm just going to throw it out there. If you're going to move anyway, why not move twice? Just move twice, and just remember, you can leave a lot of your stuff packed, but this is a great way to jump in, and you're about to see why. The investor B as the landlord in these following slides, this is the person who is getting an investment loan. Okay, so investor C is moving in, so they only have to put down 5%. And of course, their interest rate depends on, their down payment, credit score, etc. But investor B, the landlord, has got to put 15 or 20% down. So the interest rate again depends on the down payment. You do need a higher credit score, which of course makes sense, when you think about a mortgage company, just because, people would pay their own primary mortgage, before they would, let it go back to the bank. But certainly, having an investor loan would be the second priority. So just to throw knock out there, I know so many of you have already connected with Francine or Kenny or a person off of our knock team. But just to take a minute for now, y'all, if you don't have this phone number that's on the screen, this 404-793-7109, can you just take it down or take a picture with your phone? Because this is our concierge number with Knock. And we're so grateful to Knock. And y'all have heard us talk about it on sales meetings, and you've gotten emails talking about the home swap. And it's where, now sellers can find their new home and make an offer without a contingency and then list their home after they've already moved. So it really will get a lot of sellers off the fence. But today I want to talk about Knock in a different way. Y'all, I want to encourage you to get pre-qualified for a loan. Okay. The reason is that a lot of times you hear information like you're going to hear today, and a lot of people do like Lynn and just go out and buy 2 properties since October 20th class. So way to go, Lynn. But a lot of times, you might think, well, I just want to think about it, and I've got some things coming up, but maybe I'll jump in like in March or April. Okay, that's the perfect reason to call and get pre-qualified right now with Knock. Because, a lot of times, y'all, there'll be something on our credit that we didn't know was there just because it was like a utility bill that got like that. Or we can start to look at our own debt to income ratio and see how we're doing to make it easy. Because I can tell you right now, now that you got this information, you're going to have an opportunity come up, and then you're going to start the process, and then you lose the house. That was the great deal. So it's just like Melinda said. I mean, she's purchased homes before that already have tenants in them. I've purchased homes before that already have tenants in them. I mean, it's beautiful. And so if the opportunity comes up and you're already pre-approved at Knock, then it's such a quick process. I mean, then it's just, an appraisal and all downhill. So I can't encourage you enough to just call. It's so awesome when you call. It's so professional. It says, thank you for calling the Solid Source concierge line for Knock. I mean, it's so beautiful for you and your clients. There's a co-branded web page. So if you save this, you can go on there and just get pre-qualified from that page. But, even if you decide to go with another lender, why not just try? Why not just try? And it's super impressive as well that Knock has, like you said, the comment about 15% investor loans as well. But, I think it's kind of like when you close at Wiseman and there's a problem closing, then you get preferential treatment, and, Seth Wiseman jumps in if he has to, because you're a solid source agent. It's the same way at Knock. I mean, there are people and they are just going to help. So please take their information down. Okay. So y'all, is everybody ready for some numbers? Okay, I dare somebody to tell me you're not going to buy a house once we get done with this. It's only a few slides, but listen, I saw a few of you on here who I know are investor A, and who are flipping houses all the time, but all you're doing is a day job. What we're doing in this class is creating passive income for the short and the long term, but especially the long term. That is the goal of this class, is to help you create passive income for you and your family. So this is the way to do it. This is the way to look at it. So when we are determining the return on investment for investor B and investor C is the owner occupied. So that one is 3.25%. And y'all, this was all one day last week. Francine and I were on the phone. So when I was putting this together, and so thank you again, Francine. But I thought it would be interesting just to look at the different rates compared to the amount that's required to put down as a down payment, and then carry it all the way through to see, what the break even is, even at the end of year one, and where you are. So we're using $300,000 as the sales price. So the down payment for investor C, because you're moving in, is 5%. If you're just going to buy it as an investment property, then it'd be 15 or 20. Of course, 15% is a higher interest rate than 20. I do want to let y'all know, I forgot to say this in the beginning when we were talking about Carlton sheets and the cassette tapes. Y'all, Bill Finch, I know you've been investing for a long time. I mean, what's the highest interest rate, y'all? If you think you've got the highest interest rate ever paid for more, if you think you've got the highest interest rate, then you got to shout it out right now. What have y'all paid for mortgages before? Well, I have paid 16.5%. When I started investing in the 90s, that's just how much it was. As a matter of fact, you had to put 30% down on investment property, and it was still that high. And so this was in the mid 90s. But you know, when you look at what these rates are, I personally think, you know, it's beautiful and almost ridiculous, you know, that you can get investment rates this close to a primary residence loan rate. So that's great to know just as we move forward. So now we're going to take one step further. And so now we've got the exact same rates, but now we're looking at the mortgage payment, the principal and interest mortgage payment on the $300,000 house that we're buying. Okay. So the payment, if we only put 5% down at 3.25%, is $1,640.34. See, listen, Kenneth, now that you're like on the TV now, I mean, we're always going to have to, you know, call on you because it seems safer. I mean, so how much was the rent? How much are we getting in rent? Remember?
You want me to turn my volume on?
Yeah, 1,600. So remember, in this example that we're going to use, we're getting $1,600 a month in rent. Okay, that's what we've looked at rent.com. We're looking at this house. We're seeing if we think it's a good deal. We don't even know the city. It's somewhere in Georgia, but we've never been there, but we're willing to drive because it looks like a good deal. They're clearing land around it. We can get a great house, you know, 3 or 4 bedroom, 3 bedroom and an office, 2.5 baths, 2-car garage. And for $300,000, it looks great. And we're thinking, well, $1,640, you know, for the mortgage payment. If I'm only getting $1,600 from the tenant, you know, that's going to put me upside down every month. Now, remember, everyone doesn't care about that, but let's just go through the whole example for a minute. Do you know what's strange? Look down here at the investment of 15%, like the 15% down payment. That really only goes between 1,640 and 1,617. Does anybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's like $25, even though your down payment was, of course, significantly more. Now we're going to add depreciation. Okay, so listen, don't hesitate to jump in, you know, if you've got questions when we're going on right now. We're going to take a minute and pull over on the side of the road and drink a juice box as we talk about depreciation. And then we're jumping back into how much you're actually making. You are not upside down in the monthly rent, but you've got to understand why you're not. So depreciation is on all rental property because it's an investment, and you can, of course, depreciate investments. The IRS assigns 27.5 years to residential property to depreciate it. So using our example of $300,000, the average number that most people write off for depreciation is 80% of the sales price. It doesn't matter, even if you bought the house in cash. Okay, it does not matter what your financing is. This has nothing to do with financing. This is an additional benefit. So the sales price 300 times 80 is $240,000. The reason, by the way, which we'll look at in a moment, but only the building can be depreciated, not land. So we'll dig a little deeper in that, but let's stay on the payment for a minute. So here's the thing, the $240,000 that can be depreciated for 27.5 years equals $87.27 a year. the way that you find out what that actually means to you, because you know, when you look at that number, you just go 8727. I mean, that sounds like a good number, you know, that I've been getting. So this is the way to find out how that's going to impact you at, I say tax time. I mean, it's actually impacting you every month because it's tax. If you're a real estate agent, that you don't have to pay in your quarterly taxes because you're anticipating this depreciation, but you take your tax bracket. So I just use 30 for a good round number. So you take the amount that's been depreciated and then times it by your tax bracket. So I use 30 as an example. So that is $2,618 a year difference that you will not be paying in taxes. Or if you have W-2 income, that would be reimbursed to you because you have already paid it. So the $2,618, y'all, that's for one house. So this is about to be beautiful in a second. Okay. So did everybody get that? So I'm breaking it down in a few different ways. I put this one up since we explained it the long way. So you could take a picture of this slide if you want to, so you could share it with your clients. Because y'all, when you have clients and they say, you go, gosh, you know, I'm really looking forward to helping you find a house. Y'all, just a common conversation right now as well. I wish you could help me, you know, with my tax liability. You can. Okay, you can. When you hear people complaining about how much they're paying in taxes, now you are the positive person in the conversation because you're going to talk about depreciation and you're about to be their savior. So this is, you know, of course, all legit. I actually quote the IRS publications in this as well so that you can have the backup for it. So to get you really excited, because no one has shouted amen, my sister yet, we're gonna look at what if you had, you know, 3 houses. So using the same example, that one house, you know, took off 8727. So that means if you had 2 $300,000 houses, then it would be, you know, $17,454. Y'all look at, so tell me what happens if you made, at the bottom here, you can see this example. So if you made $100,000 this year, okay, number one, congratulations. Number two is that you have had to pay at least $40,000 in taxes. Okay, you've had to pay $40,000, which makes your tax liability, oh, I'm saying 40, maybe it's 38, whatever it is. I mean, but it's a lot. So here's the thing. Notice I started this example at the bottom, and I've got one that's broken out better at the end of this, just to make it more clear. But if you take that $100,000 net income, notice I put the word net. That is after all of your write-offs. It's after your personal exemption. It's after your real estate, advertising, and anything else that you wrote off, your car. You could only get your income down to $100,000, and that's what you're going to pay taxes on. Does everybody get me so far? That's where depreciation picks up. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, if you had 10 houses, if you were renting 10 houses, you just took the amount that you owe the government from $100,000 to $12,730. That's how much you would pay taxes on. Somebody better unmute and say amen, my sister, or we are not moving forward.
Amen.
Amen.
Yes, and amen.
Amen, my sister.
Amen, my sister.
I mean, y'all, this is sick. I mean, this is sick. This is me taking the net income that you are at. And it's, I mean, this is such a gift. I mean, on $12,000, how much do you pay the government? Like $3,000. This is completely legit. I mean, this has been going on for over 30 years. And this is why I started buying all these houses. So this $100,000 net, that's already taking off all your mortgage interest, everything. This is what depreciation does. Here's the thing too, you know, everybody, I'll tell you, the people that find this the hardest to believe are people that pay cash for houses. And congratulations that you're in a place in your life where you're, you know, buying investments for cash. But even people that pay cash get it. This has nothing to do with your mortgage interest write-off. You get to write that off too. This is in addition to. So if this slide is not a reason, if you can't sell this to investors, if you, those of you who have friends who are retired, who are complaining, about the interest rates offered in the bank, who are concerned about the stock market because it's too high right now, all of that, real estate is a great place to be. Not only is it an appreciating asset, but it immediately attacks your tax bill. I mean, I hate to move on because it doesn't get much better than that, but I'm just gonna.
Michelle, the other thing you're not talking about is the fact that, let's say you're just planning for retirement and everybody goes, well, I'm not going to manage 10 houses when I'm old, like I am. Then you start 1031ing them back into a house that you would live in, that you're still going to rent. That's an expensive house.
Yes.
And then rent it out for a while, fix it up, and then guess what? You've got your retirement house, and that's the end of that. So recapture can be put.
And we are going to talk about recapture at the end. I just wanted to explain it enough to be able to incorporate it into the payment for a minute. And so to determine the basis for the depreciation, like we said, 80% is the standard at the IRS. But what we have to think about though is, how you can see, or you could purchase a house that's only like 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, 950 square feet, but it's on 5 acres of land. Now we cannot use 80%. Does that, that, of course not, because that is obviously not what you were purchasing. You're purchasing the land. So, oh, look, here's my example up here. And so, oh, look, Belinda, really, Belinda did the intro for the second part. But, if you do live in the house and then convert it to rental, whether you're doing it the way that Belinda was saying, buying it, doing the 1031 tax-free exchange, which we talk about at the end, but I'm doing the 1031 tax-free exchange. And then, that does only apply to investment property, but that's okay because you'll just rent it for a few years and then move in it and then do all the renovations that you wanted to. And now you're living in your dream home and you still have not paid taxes, on the money. So that's very exciting. There's, this is just some of the backup material. If you want to take a picture of the screen, publication 946, if you go to irs.gov, the website, then if you put the publication 946 in there, it'll talk about how to depreciate property. It is funny though, y'all. Guess what else is depreciated? They use examples on the IRS website, and other things that are depreciated are cattle. Like cattle. I mean, there's all this different stuff. You don't really think about it, but we're just going to keep it in the real estate context today. So now when we add depreciation, so you can tell this is the same chart. I just keep adding more columns. Okay. So I know this looks like a real jumbled number here at the end, but I wanted to break it down like how I got it instead of just putting the answer. So now we're back at the owner occupied. Okay. And so let's follow this all the way across. So remember, the owner occupied one, it's not going to get to write off depreciation when you live there, but as soon as you move out, you do get to. So I went ahead and added it in. So now, and look what else I added in. Whoop, whoop. 3% commission. Hello. So you only put down $15,000, okay, on the house because you put 5% down because you moved. Then you did take your commission and it's $9,000. So right now you only have $6,000 invested in this house. Okay. Now let's look at not the monthly payment that we saw before, but we're going to take it with it reconciled, including the depreciation, because that amount, that 2786 or 2618, remember that's an actual number. So remember, we were at 1640, which was like $40 more than we were getting in rent. But if we incorporate the money that we're actually getting, and just divide it by 12, which equals $218.16. Now when you see what the whole benefit is, now how far are you up? You're up like almost $180 a month as opposed to being $40 under. Am I losing anybody or is everybody on? I mean, I don't see any cartwheels or anything, but
Here.
so y'all in year one, and really even this is why, because listen, I still see some of you because you think I can't see you, but rolling your eyes when I keep talking about moving 2 or 3 times. But this is why it's so worth it. Okay. So at the end of the year, at the end of the year, so let's just say you lived in this house for 6 months, 8 months, whatever, and then you rented it out. So you started doing the depreciation, because I included it for the whole year in this, which it would be from that year forward. But now, do you see that you've only got $3,866? That's how much this house cost you. Now, if somebody is single on this call and you do not have physical ailments stopping you, and you're telling me that you are not willing to pay $3,866 after your commission, okay, and getting your taxes written off if you're married, extra bonus, because this can come, if you're filing joint returns, I mean, just think about all the tax savings, quite frankly. I mean, that's the huge part of depreciation. But so I've literally gotten it down to $3,866 out of pocket for you for year one. This is of course made up in the second year, and now you've paid nothing at the end of year two. But so now why don't you want to? Because this $300,000 house in 5 years, 10 years, I mean, Belinda, I can't even imagine what your houses have gone up to. I mean, having them, how long have you had the ones in Athens for 4 years?
No, my kids are 30 years old, so we bought them. Yeah, we've had them a long time. And then my mother was an investor, so I had some things we 1030. So we've got quite a few houses that are worth quite a bit. So thank you. Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. But I mean, the point is, that people want to say, which is why I showed a picture of my house where I grew up in the beginning of our program. The lie of Satan is that this is not for us, that success is not for us, that passive income is for other people smarter, with more money, with more education. No, it is not. It is for you. That's who it's for. That's who it's for. Everybody has to receive it. If you have not read this book, I mean, please do, because you know what? It's so good. And out of all of the investment books I've ever read, and I love reading investment books, this is still my favorite. And it's so easy to read.
And I was just if they are nervous about that, there's a game called Cash Flow 101.
Yes.
And all the stuff that you're doing that people are going, I don't follow, I don't get it. It's done like Monopoly, and you start out and you need to get that game and play it with your kids, play it with yourself. And by the time you've played it, this will not be hard to understand.
I know. Well, listen, I hope that y'all are jumping in though, if you don't understand, because I want to help you. And, this is really what the book is about. The rich don't work for money. Money works for them. So what I do understand is when you first get started, like when Belinda bought her houses in Athens, okay, she was busy. She had to paint. She had to learn to interview tenants. She probably had to learn to get, very direct with tenants, because y'all were all nice people. And it's hard to be confrontational until it's not hard to be confrontational. And the thing is, we don't have to degrade people. We just have to say, listen, we're going to talk about the narrative in a little while. But the thing is, if you cannot pay the rent, I am not going to pursue you. And I know that some people do. And I mean, to each his own. For me personally, you see, I don't care if they pay the rent or not. I just need you to leave if you're not going to. That's all. That's all. Really, like it. I want to keep it cool. I don't want them to trash the house. I don't want them to be mad at me. I don't want to have to look over my shoulder or have my tires slashed. It's just, if you're not going to pay, I want you to leave. And if we have that understanding, then we're going to get along great. And you can't be nicer than that. It happens. A lot of landlords, chase them down saying, oh, you owe me for the whole lease. I don't. I just need to get somebody else in here, because this is not all about you, this tenant this afternoon. This is about me having passive income, and then I don't have to work when I get up in the morning unless I want to. That's what it's about. That's the mindset that we all have to get. Y'all, I'm going to drop in new home as an investment right now, because I have been a fan of new homes. So if you are super busy, if you have small kids, if you have a day job and your schedule is hectic, then think about a new home for an investment. Because one of the 2 houses in Woodstock, when that land was being cleared on 92 that I bought, was a new home. I mean, we made like $80,000 on that house in a few years, when I was selling it. And the only reason I did is because it was a bigger house than I usually get for rentals. And it just takes too long, to turnkey big houses. Well, and the value had gone up so significantly. So it was just, an extra bonus of $80,000 that year. But I mean, can you even imagine, those of you who are not doing this yet, just saying in this, just a sentence, I mean, you're not jumping up and down. There's no champagne. You're just saying, but I mean, at least it was an extra $80,000. Y'all, this is for real. I mean, this is what so many of the folks on this call have done. But, if you purchase a new home when you see them being built, number one, I'm not a huge fan of infill lots. I like the new subdivisions more, because then you can get them like in phase 1 of 4. And so we all know what's going to happen in the subdivisions. They're going to go up in value, of course, the more that's built. And so there's no major repair costs. So I've just taken the folks who have small kids or not enough time and saying, well, I don't have time to turnkey. I don't have time to do this. Perfect. Then a new home is for you for an investment, because you don't have to do anything. It's perfect. And talk about easy to get a tenant for at least 5 years, because who doesn't want to live in a new home? So that's just a little side note there. But I'm a big new home fan, not at the end of the phase out, because now it's not going to pop up in value, but in the beginning it will. Remember, if you are going to go the new home route, that a new home development, y'all, listen, they don't care who they sell to when it's in phase 1. They just want to pay the bank off, so that they can get money for their second and third and fourth phase. And so they're just trying to get through it as soon as possible. So a lot of times they'll let investors purchase, because once it starts to get full, a lot of times then they start to implement the rental restrictions when the homeowner association is turned over to the homeowners. So, and one of the reasons for that is just FHA loans a lot of times can be hindered if the development has over 25% or whatever the percentage is currently, of rentals in there. So this is just an example, if you want to take a picture of it, the special stipulation that you can write in a new home contract. And because see, sometimes it'll be, have y'all ever had an agent on duty in a new home, and they'll just say, oh, sure, you can do that. Everything's yes, 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 yes. But then the builder doesn't sign for a few months, and then things have changed. That's why I like to put this in there in the very beginning. And I just say, well, if you won't sign the contract, that's fine, but I do need this signed, because, the thing is, if they change that before that house is finished, I still get mine. I still get to rent it, because I'm not buying it. If I'm buying it to move in, it doesn't matter. But if I'm buying it in phase 1, y'all, a lot of times you are, well, and you're of course grandfathered in. If you bought it and you've never lived there, now you're grandfathered. So even though no one else can rent in there, so it keeps your property value high, you can. So look
Excuse me.
for phase 1 in new homes.
Excuse me, Michelle,
Yeah.
what did you say that you get signed so that they can't renege on the right to rent?
Okay, see the second one that says seller confirms that he or she has the authority to allow this property to be leased until HOA is turned over to the homeowner. I'm just saying it has someone else sign that besides the listing agent. And y'all, I'm just gonna say in phase 1, and everyone knows this. I mean, we've been in the business a long time. It's just in phase 1 for new homes, y'all, builders are happy to sign the contract, because it's phase 1 and they have to have a signed contract to get more money from the bank anyway. So, phase 1 is usually not that hard. I'm just saying, be sure to write this in there, because they're going to change it. And because the homeowners, of course, don't want tenants in there. That's why you want to get yours in so that you're grandfathered.
So what happens when the HOA takes over?
Well, your grandfather, because you've never lived there, so they can't enforce that rule on you. It's only for everyone that is currently the primary residence owner occupied. They can only enforce it on people who are already using it for that purpose.
So they don't have the right to do retroactive.
Nope.
Okay.
No. And so some of them like to say that they do, but then when they try to enforce it and call the attorney goes, well, you can't make them do it. It's never been used for that use. But you having that in your contract would make it even harder, because now, I mean, they've totally agreed with you.
But when you sell it, the new owner has to do
Yes.
it.
Yes. When you sell, and okay, so y'all, this is a true story. So I really, I did this. Okay. And so, but I had moved in, I was investor C and I moved in and then I was renting it, when I moved out, of course. And then the homeowners association changed it and said that, that they weren't going to allow rentals in that subdivision anymore. It was in Roswell. And so I did not live there at the time. So of course I was grandfathered in. Now that HOA, they started sending me, I mean, just all kinds of, those nasty notes, saying, I see a weed under your tree, I see a cracked hairline, of the paint by a window. I mean, it was so crazy. So I had to, show the less kind side, in a very direct letter saying, stop it. But so they do want that, but so what, your property value is really good for you, quite frankly, when it does go to the homeowner association and nobody else can rent, because it does raise the property value. So what if that's one that you want to sell? So what if you're telling me your story next year and you go, well, I mean, the homeowner association was doing the same thing to me as they were to you, picking on you. So I just decided to sell it because it just got to be a pain because they just don't want tenants in there. And so I made $80,000, I mean, okay, well, that's a great story. I mean, that's awesome. And just like Belinda said earlier, talking about putting that 80,000 into a 1031 tax-free exchange, and then you don't have to go through what investor A did that we talked about in the beginning of the class, because they're paying investor A, the person that's flipping houses, y'all, they're paying so much in capital gains every year. Heavens. I mean, I think it's a blessing, to be able to do the 1031 tax-free exchange, but to do that, you have to hold the property for 1 year and 1 day or longer. So, so you can't do it within a 1 year period. So that's why it doesn't work for investor A, the 1031 tax-free exchange. So, y'all, we're going to move into, does anybody have any questions here? I can open chat box.
Yeah, Michele, quick question here. What about if the builder refused to allow that statement?
Yeah,
of
then
the
I just don't
contract?
buy the house. Yeah, I just don't
You
buy
don't
the
buy.
house. No.
Okay, gotcha.
Because
Cool,
here's
because
the thing, y'all, that's the one thing. And by the way, FMLS even has that category. It says, are there rental restrictions? Just because somebody says no, I would still check it out, and to confirm before I put an offer in. But
okay,
but that a great way to look for places with no rental restrictions is to, sort by that criteria, use that as one of your criteria in FMLS so that it saves you time when you're looking for them.
okay.
And so let's see, make the new rental restrictions.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else, I'm going through the chat box. Does anybody else have any questions? Focus on solution. Right. Okay. Okay. All right, we're going back in. So let's talk about legal questions on the application. Y'all, Derek's class is going to be put on YouTube as well as the highlights of this class. But he had a great sales meeting yesterday discussing some of the GREC considerations, Georgia Real Estate Commission considerations, and landlord tenant considerations in Georgia when you hold an active real estate license, especially because we're held to a higher standard, even though it is our own personal property. So I thought I would bring some of that up today just as a nice to know. But also, if you haven't been a landlord before, some of these things may seem backward or a concern, but that's why I wanted to talk about them so that you know that they're actually okay, so that you don't have to go through the school of hard knocks to find out. You can learn from other folks who've already been there and are on their way back. How it's so funny, typically if we're working with buyers and they say, oh, I had a bankruptcy 8 months ago, it's like, oh, I mean, it's awful. And but for tenants, so I am actually a fan as a landlord of bankruptcy. Okay. Because look at Belinda shaking her head. I know. Because when y'all, if they just filed bankruptcy last year, they can't file it again for 6 years. Okay. That is good for you as a landlord. So, I mean, seriously, I mean, the only bankruptcy I'm concerned about is if it was over 7 years ago, because it could be time to re-up. So high debt to income ratio is not okay, because that might mean that bankruptcy is in their future, in their immediate future. So here's the bottom line about that. Bankruptcy is the hardest eviction. So we're going to talk about evictions later, but that's the reason that bankruptcy stinks. Somebody on the sales meeting yesterday said that some of the things that she had read really seemed like Georgia was a tenant-friendly state. And I said, please come to class, because actually it's a landlord-friendly state. Georgia is extremely landlord-friendly. It's very easy eviction. It is our contract law, meeting of the minds. If you want to talk about a tenant-friendly state, it's New York. New York State, good luck trying to get tenants out, because they've got their whole, leasehold thing going on and all of that. So we're going to talk about some things, and I want to invite you that have your own leases and some of your hard knocks. I'm going to take notes when you chime in on some things that you've put in here, and then I'm going to send what's on this presentation along with any good suggestions that we can all add to our leases. What I suggest that everyone does is have a Word document, at least. That way it really just remains a living document. Sometimes when something bad happens with a tenant, you get so frustrated and you're just like, oh my gosh, is this even worth it? Or God forbid, like 2 air conditioners break in 1 year, on different houses or whatever. All I'm saying is just that putting these suggestions in, along with, I'm sure we'll get others that volunteer some things that they've learned along the way. These terms are going to make your life as a landlord not scary, okay, less confrontational, and just help you enjoy the experience. Because remember, the goal is passive income that pays our monthly expenses. It is not to enjoy being a landlord. So that means that we just need to make the landlord part of this as small as possible. Make it as, take as little time every year as possible. So that's what we're going to do. And that's the goal of what we're talking about right now. One thing is a per day late fee. Okay, that I put in mind. Here's the thing. If you say that rent is late if it's not received by the 5th, and there's a $50 late charge, well, then what's the tenant's motivation to pay it? Because it's $50, right? So if they paid it on the 6th, it's an extra $50. If they paid it on the 12th, it's an extra $50 because it's just a $50 late fee. But what about if you have a per day late fee? So the way to word that is due on the 1st, late charges start to accrue on the 5th. There's another reason that I word it this way, which we're going to address in a moment. So the rent is due on the 1st, not late on the 5th. It's due on the 1st. Late charges start to accrue on the 5th. It's a small change, but it'll make a big difference to you as a landlord. You'll go with me in just a second to see why. Tenant pays for initial eviction costs. Y'all, that makes a huge difference to see when they're going to pay and what they're going to do to you. If, because this is just one little tiny sentence in my lease agreement, but when they have to pay for the initial eviction cost, then they don't want to be late enough that you would be filing for eviction. Or if you did serve a 7-day letter, which we're going to get through that process, but just if you did serve it, then they would respond immediately because they don't want to mount up charges that you're going to get to keep out of their security deposit. Another one, unpaid late fees can be taken out at the end of the term. Okay, so those of you who are listening so far and saying, this seems great, but I mean, I just don't know if I'm cut out to have that direct conversation with somebody about they owe me, $50. Like if you put a per day late fee of $20 a day on there, even though if it does go to court, the judge can knock it down to $10. But so what? They would have to take you to court to make it go down to $10. If in the state of Georgia, if you both agree to it and the judge doesn't overrule it, then whatever you agree to, as long as it's easy to understand and you had a meeting of the minds, then that's what they owe you. So why would I put this in here? Does anybody know? Unpaid late fees can be taken out at the end of term.
They've already agreed to it. It's already in the lease. They agreed to it.
They
It's not
did.
negotiable.
That is a reason. And also for the very sweet people who say, okay, so y'all, I want to tell you there's an emergency coming up for a large, when I say a large percentage, I just mean a much greater percentage than usual per month. Okay. That emergency is happening next week. Okay. It's December the 25th. So many times in December, okay, is the most common month. If you have 5 houses, 10 houses, 3 houses, get ready for it. Okay. Because there are all of these emergencies that people are going to share with you. So what I say when my narrative, when I'm bringing people in is just say, hey, you know what? I know sometimes there are emergencies that happen in December, and actually my family has that emergency too on December 25th. So I just want to be sure that everybody's on board with the fact that, just because I am friendly to you does not mean I'm your friend. I'm the landlord and you're the tenant. And this is a house that I'm paying a mortgage on. And if you don't pay me rent, then I won't be paying the mortgage. Now, would I really? Of course. But the thing is, it's really just laying it on them and letting them know. What happens when you tell somebody that says to you that they had an emergency? Okay, because they don't call the emergency December 25th. It just happens that time every year. The emergency is actually that they've had a sickness in the family, that a close relative lost their job and they had to do this so that their kids weren't taken away. I mean, y'all, trust me, I bet we could all share some landlord stories of stories that we've been told. But the thing is, if somebody says they have an emergency, even though, let's just say for a moment that it's a 100% lie, okay? But but they said that, and then you say, well, you're welcome to pay it late, but just add the late fees. Does that make me seem like a warm, caring person? Or do you think that would put a pebble in their shoe and that they could be passive aggressive toward me because they always remember that even though they were lying to me about the emergency, that I still made them pay late fees? See, for some reason, and this is not just since COVID, just people think that if they give you this pitch or whatever, that if you believe them, then you'll pay that for them, or that you should pay that for them. And those are just takers, unfortunately. But if we put this in here, which y'all, people, when they're moving in, I hope that they read the lease. I go over a lot of it, and I have a lot of places mine where I make the initial. But the reason that I say they can be taken out at the end of the lease term is simple. It's because I don't want them to be mad at me. Does that make sense? Like during the lease, like I don't want them to say, well, I told you I had an emergency. I told you I was in the hospital. I told you then my child went to the hospital. Then my husband went to the hospital. Okay, I hear everybody was in the hospital, but the mortgage is still due. Okay. Do you think if they catch it up and they pay and they stay there for 3 years, and that the only time that they were late is that one time, do you think I'm going to take those late fees out of the security deposit? No, of course I'm not. Of course I'm not going to do that. Okay, just because I appreciate them being there for 3 years. I didn't have to turnkey it. I didn't have to find new tenants. They've been low maintenance. They were only late that 1 month. So of course I'm not going to take it out. I am reserving the right to take it out. That's all. I'm just reserving the right to take it out. So this is the way that it's actually worded in what I use. Tenant shall pay rent to landlord monthly, advance. Rent is due on the 1st, late charges start to accrue on the 5th or thereafter. So here we go. This is why we do this. So y'all, if you accept less rent, so let's say the rent is $1,600. Okay. Notice I also said I defined what is deemed paid. I defined it. So I said, because here's the thing, it must be received in the bank account or at the address set forth herein, or received by the landlord in person to be considered paid. Because you know what tenants can say is, I did pay it. I put it in the mail. Okay. This is what I call paid. is me receiving it in the mail, receiving it in person, or the tenant depositing it into the bank account I gave them. So if you accepted less rent, so let's say of the 1,600, same scenario, it's December, the emergency's coming up, and somebody said, I could give you 900. Okay, but I'm not going to be able to give you the other 700 until the first week of January. If I take that $900, which I do, by the way, if it's their first time, and especially if it's in December, quite frankly, because January and February are usually the worst months to rent, unless you're Belinda and you're renting to college students in Georgia. But typically the summer is the best time because that's when kids are out of school, people will move. So if you accepted less rent last month, so $900 in this example, because the tenant said he or she would catch up next week, here's the thing, wording the lease this way allows you to file for eviction on the 2nd of the month instead of waiting until the 6th. Most lease agreements say it's due on the 1st and late on the 5th. You see, mine said it's due on the 1st and late charges start to accrue on the 5th. So that means you are in default on the 2nd, not the 6th. The reason that makes a big difference is because it's typically going to take you 10 days to turnkey a house once you get used to it. You'll have your painter lined up, carpet, whatever, before the person even leaves. And you can have that house re-rented. Typically, I mean, what do you say, Belinda? Like within 21 days is usually my average that I've got somebody else like moving in. Oh, Belinda, we can't hear.
Hey, yeah, it just with me, it's, the Athens stuff. I mean, they're moving in on top of each other, and
Right.
they're working together. So that's different. My places in Decatur, it takes a month. I mean, it's just,
Right.
takes
It's a month.
It's-
So Belinda, you know where I'm going right now, y'all. So when do tenants, not like college students, because they know that they need to live there, but when do tenants start to look for a house? Like they know that their lease is up from their apartment or their previous rental on the 30th of the month. Okay.
But no, they're looking ahead of time. Yeah, they're looking 30.
Some are looking ahead of time, but here's the problem: unless they want to pay 2 rent payments, because I'm not going to take mine off the market for a whole month, just because, I mean, that cuts way into ROI. So a lot of times, because houses are going so fast right now in the current market, people will really just start calling like 2 weeks early because they know they're going to lose it if they don't pay for the month that they're not there, just to get a house that's still available. So if I can file for eviction on the 2nd, okay, then I can still get these people out, usually within 21 days when it's not, crazy what went on last year and stuff. Usually within 21 days, I can get them all the way out and get somebody else in by the 1st. That's beautiful.
That's beautiful, but if you must have great contractors, because I struggle. I can't get the painter there, the clean. I can't. They leave stuff at the street.
Girl, I feel you. This is what I'm telling y'all. And Belinda, honestly, at your age and my age now, would I want to do what I used to do? No, girl, I used to do it by myself. I would go get one of those paint suits, get a sprayer, and go in and do it. I mean, so because for me, before we got to where we are right now, Belinda, where this success is in the rear view mirror, where we can help other people do it. It was really all about getting everything paid off where you're 100% debt free. You know what I mean? Because that is checking out, of the rat race. These are just some other late fee kind of things that I put in. If the rent check is postmarked after the 3rd, they had no intention of getting that to me by the 5th. Okay, that's number one. If the tenant does not add the total late fee into the following month's check, then I can deduct it out of security deposit at the termination of the lease. And then an additional $30 will be charged for any rent payment that was deposited in the bank account after the 5th or mailed after the 3rd. So the only waived late fee is one in writing from landlord to tenant. That is a very important sentence that actually put in a few different contexts through the lease. NSF fees, we don't have to go through all of this, but you just want to be certain that you have an NSF section saying, what will happen and if you're going to stop taking checks or what you want them to be able to do, as far as giving you the money. But I try to make it as uncomfortable as possible because, that gets on my nerves. Okay, so y'all are going to love this. So this is the no smoking. So the reason that we can put this in here like this is because smoking cigarettes is not a protected class. Okay. It's so you people, do you smoke? Will there be smoking in the house? Because it's not a protected class. And I can, have something to say about that. So putting this in your lease agreement, and by the way, this is one of the ones in mine that has a line where they have to initial. So, so it says, landlord may expend for actual damage arising out of related, this is about abandonment of the property. But look, okay, so if while ordinary wear and tear is expected, the house must be odor free and ready to rent condition. So y'all, you'd have to be a landlord and have this experience to truly embrace the stank, okay, that some people will leave behind. But it can be awful. I mean, like food, like all in there and stuff. So I say tenant agrees to do any and all smoking outside the house. If smoking is done inside the house at any time, tenant realizes that walls will likely need to be sealed with primer and repainted. Tile grout will have to be steamed, cleaned, and the carpet replaced to rid smoke odor. This cost will be incurred solely by the tenant. That's a great paragraph, okay? Because y'all listen, if the tenant was in the house and you had a fireplace in the house, if the tenant just smoked in the fireplace, you know what I mean? Would you even know? No, it's only rude tenants that want to smoke in the bedroom or the bathroom or whatever, and it's so hard to get it out. Yes, they do need to pay for all that. Oh, look, this is a funny example. Sweet tenants, how bad can it be? So this this is from I walked in to this was in Arizona, oh, look, 1994. And so I walked in and oh my gosh, y'all, it was crazy. There was an artist obviously living there. There was also and this was 4 separate people that went to Arizona State University. But you know what it all comes back to? Because you might see these pictures, you might say, see, Michele, this is why I don't want to do this. What do you, I mean, what, how on earth did you handle it? I went to Home Depot. I walked in, I saw that. I went to Home Depot. I got the coveralls, the disposable coveralls, and rented a sprayer. And I went in and sprayed the house, and it was ready in 3 days. So, I mean, it really just comes back to time and pay. And like Belinda said, it is so hard to find good contractors that are reliable, who are really going to show up when they say they're going to show up. The more work you can do yourself, of course, the quicker you're going to reach your goal of getting out of the rat race. But let's talk about finding good tenants. This was a question on the sales meeting yesterday with Derek as well. When you screen people on the phone, okay, if they call you because you put your phone number out, they ask you questions. These are some hot tips to spend as little time as possible screening tenants. Y'all, when we're representing clients who want to rent their house, so we are the listing agent, then of course we want to be able to submit 5, 10 applications to be the lease applications to the landlord, because it makes us look great. We did our job, whatever. However, when you are the landlord, you really don't want to review in-depth 10 loan applications. You also don't want to leave yourself open to any fair housing claims or any other unfair treatment, being canceled, being trashed online, or anything else, saying, well, she didn't take me because of some protected class. This is the way to avoid that. Okay. And of course, I'm not saying that anyone on this call would ever do that. And I wouldn't either, but I still think it's a good idea to keep ourselves out of harm's way. And so typically a good way to catch scammers, okay, a good way to catch scammers. So most of the bad landlord stories I've heard throughout the years have been, oh my gosh, I have these tenants and they didn't get out for 4 months. And then they did this, and then they took my refrigerator, they took the kitchen cabinets. I mean, those are some of the worst. So this is what I have found. I have found that people usually don't just turn evil at 28 years old or 35 years old. There's usually a track that you can find if you can find it. Because sometimes, y'all, as hard as it is to believe, but I'll just go ahead and share it with you so that you don't have to find out the hard way. Some tenants will actually call their cousin and say, hey, I'm giving your number as my manager at Best Buy. And say that I work at Best Buy. So I'm going to, I've got 3 different houses that I'm putting applications for. So do you mind please just saying, hey, this is Brittany at Best Buy, how can I help you for the next 3 days? Because they're going to call and check my reference. And it's the cousin. Okay. So a great way to kind of penetrate through that and just see if there's anything that would make you want to dig deeper. They also do that for their previous landlord. They call their friends and they tell them to vouch for them, that they were awesome tenants and they wish they hadn't left. It's just that they decided to sell the house for, some reason that's not even true. Because actually the tenant didn't pay rent for 3 months and, they've got their friend that's about to vouch for them being a great tenant. If all we did was call the phone numbers on the lease application, then all of this, we would not know this. And if we're new landlords, we just take people at their words because we don't lie and we would never do that. So we don't really think about other people doing that. And I'm certainly not saying the majority of people. It is the minority of people. It is not many. I would say, out of 100 tenants that maybe, less than 10 would really go overboard, with this really bad history and then willing to lie about it and then try to get other people in on the scheme. But it happens. So the way to avoid that so that you still like being a landlord over, to get to the passive income, here's a great question. Where do you live now? Okay. Why are you moving? Where do you work? And then just ask them how their credit is. Okay. If they say they don't know, they probably do know. Okay. And here's the thing. We'll need your consent to do a background check to get started. Y'all, that one thing. So see this phone call, this is a short phone call so far. Just asking these questions, but if they got down to the last question without me saying, I don't think it's going to work out, then as soon as I say, we'll need to do a background check to get started, y'all, I can't tell, it's really humorous sometimes, but now I somewhat expect it, but there's so many that just go click, they're out of there. When you open with the message, you're doing a background check, they're like, oh, okay. Because y'all, sometimes the reason people don't want to go to an apartment is because of all the checking, so just know you always want to tell them that you need to do a background check to get started. Don't take that lease application. Do not meet them in person. Do not FaceTime. Okay, because that way, if somebody did say that you made the decision not to let them live there because of some protected class reason, then you are tight because you're saying, I never even met them. I've never seen them. It would be impossible for me to know that they were handicapped or, this religion or whatever. So it's just, I just think it's great to not meet people until we think this is the one, so that's just a way to keep your license safe and just keep your name, off the news and not being canceled and smeared online. So on the lease application, y'all, this has evolved through the years. But notice on here, like I say, do you smoke? Will there be smoking in the house? I just like to ask. And then have you been evicted within the last 10 years? That's at the bottom. And then if you have, then I just want to know why. Because, y'all, what we know is the eviction. If someone has gone all the way to court to be evicted, they got some free rent there, y'all. I mean, and depending on the way that they worked it, quite frankly, it could have been 2 months or, heavens, last year it could have been a lot longer. But typically people can't stay for more than 2 months, with the speed that Georgia will get people out in if you just follow the right process. But but notice, see how we're asking for the supervisor's phone number? That's where that part comes in. And there's a lot of people, y'all, that they're embarrassed to tell you where they work, for whatever reason, but they'll say that they get cash for this, cash for that. I just keep going back to, in my narrative when I'm meeting tenants, the fact that, that I am extremely low maintenance as a landlord, as long as the rent is on time. And then they'll say something else funny and, say, oh, and then you're just going to love my little dog or whatever. And I'm just like, well, I'm sure I will, as long as the rent's paid on time. I mean, y'all, when I leave that meeting, they know the only thing I care about is the rent being paid on time. I have said to them at least 3 times, if an emergency happens and you need to leave before this lease is over, even though I am entitled to pursue it through this lease, I will not pursue it if you leave not owing me any money. Y'all, if they lost their jobs, okay, in on March the 5th, and they are not going to get paid, so they're not going to have enough money to pay for April. Dude, they knew it on March 5th when they lost their job. Okay. They already knew that they didn't. And let's just say they knew by March 10th because they've already called their mom, their cousins, their friends, asking them to borrow money. But those people already tapped out because they've taken so much from them before without paying them back. So now they're not loaning them money. And if you want to tell me on April the 1st that you don't have the money, but you've had to know about it for at least a few weeks, I mean, it's going to be a crossroad, so that's one of the ways I say it to people. But y'all, and you might say, gosh, Michele sounds a little mean. This isn't mean. Okay. This is not mean. I'm telling you, if there are 100 landlords on a phone, on a Zoom meeting, I bet you 90 pursue people and make them pay throughout the end of the lease. I never have. I just want you to move on because I'm just focused on passive income. Okay, so if you're not going to pay, I just need you to get out so somebody else can. And if you're going to leave early, I want you to clean out your nasty hair from the from the shower drain and stuff so that it's ready to rent. That's the least you can do. And they say they're so grateful. They're just like, well, thanks for not pursuing me. And I'm like, thanks for not leaving owing me money. But when you have all those conversations up front, it sure makes being a landlord a lot more fun and a lot less confrontational, when people are leaving. Signed authorization. Remember, we have to have a signed lease application before we can run credit or do a background check. Oh, look. Oh, this is funny. Remember how I just said about the cousin at Best Buy, because some people put their cousin's name on for to be their supervisor at work. When somebody puts on that lease agreement, like let's say they put Best Buy, and then I said, what's the phone number of your supervisor? Well, I call the personnel department of Best Buy, and just say, hey, I'm calling to confirm, and then I'll call the supervisor. But I want to call the personnel department first and be sure that they actually work there still, that they still work there. And so, y'all, there's so many pages on Google, but I just got a fresh one. This was my favorite one. It has so much great information. And you know what? The one I used to recommend in this class is no longer on. So this is recent. So this is a really good one, I think, but it's got a lot of great information about how to evict tenants, what the process is in the state of Georgia. And so just as a reminder also that HUD does test landlords. As a matter of fact, as a broker, speaking as a broker, not just as a landlord, even though I have had.
Michele, can I interrupt you for a minute, please?
Oh, yeah,
Can
sure.
you go back? Can you please go back to the last slide before this, please?
Of course.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, oh yeah, take a picture of it. That's why
Yeah.
I know you're going to see
Thank
some
you.
things that I put in here, but I think it's going to make you want to go, to that website just because it's just very clear, and they've even got forms you can download to evict people and all of that. But so does HUD test landlords? For those of you thinking about jumping in this game, that is the only test that I know that I personally have ever experienced from HUD. But I've heard it from so many landlords that work here through the years. And you know what they'll usually say? It's usually it's one of two things. It's either it's somebody disabled. It's actually not. It's HUD doing a fake phone call to try to, then charge you where you have to pay $20,000, for violating fair housing. But they'll say, hey, I'm handicapped. Would you be willing for me to make your house handicap accessible if I change it back when I leave? Okay, look, the bottom, there's only one answer, YES. Anytime somebody says anything about disability, it's probably HUD. Say yes. Okay, just say yes. Another thing that people want to say is no pets allowed. But y'all, everyone on this class, we all know, right, that service animals are not actually animals. So we cannot say that there are no service animals, in our rental houses. So that's the reason that we don't want to step on $40 carpet, or make a less than frugal decision about our choices. So this is one thing, I've had, gosh, I mean, at least 5, even at the top of my head, of my tenants in the past purchase the home from me. Okay, so they've purchased the home, and why would I want them to do that? One, when I was moving back here to Georgia from Arizona, then I had at one time I had 13 houses in Arizona. But when I was moving back, you know what? I was buying this building in Roswell. So I wanted to 1031 tax-free exchange the money. So just because we were just starting Solid Source. And so I reached out to a few of the tenants that have been there for a long time, asked them if they wanted to purchase it. And that way I could 1031 their money because I could make them all close, within that same period, and then put like 40% down on this building, which is what I did. And so here's the thing that I want us to take away from here. Don't do lease purchases with people ever. Lease purchase is negative. The reason lease purchase is negative, and it's not just for the landlord either, it's for the landlord and the tenant. Y'all, the moment that the lease purchase is signed, okay, remember how lease purchase works? Like, okay, your rent is $1,600 and, $200, let's just do for easy example, $200 of that a month is going to go toward the purchase price. Okay. Do you know what that means? It means after they pay their first rent payment of $1,600, it means that now they own a portion of your property. When they own a portion of your property and then they get divorced, or they file for bankruptcy, or one of the parties die, either the landlord or the tenant, y'all, it's like a marriage. Like lease purchase is like a marriage to somebody that you don't know. There's just really no reason for it. Lease option, on the other hand, is a great idea because the lease option can be used. It's 2 or 3 agreements. You can use the option agreement, but the option agreement is optional. But it's definitely a lease and a purchase and sale. And that way, not only are you able to, keep it separate. So like typically if they default on something in the lease, then it voids the lease option agreement. Like if they pay late or something like that, or pay up to 10 days late. However, just keep this in mind for the lease option. Option money, is that a security deposit? So in the lease purchase, it is a security deposit because it's a lease purchase, and so you're just keeping a security deposit if they, don't follow through on the lease or whatever. A lease option, they are purchasing an option this afternoon at 3:00 from you for the terms that you're going to offer them in this. So guess where I get to put that $3,000? In my checking account. And they can never have it back. It is a transaction sale. It's just like walking up with Reese's Pieces and paying for them at the counter. So they just purchased an option, whether they use it or not, it is your money. So that is fantastic. And so you can do like earnest money, is non-refundable, but I am just a big fan of option money. And so the lease option also, this is with 3 agreements. Option money is not a security deposit. Really, and can be in your checking account. Look at what I write in the option agreement or the purchase and sale special steps. All parties agree. And I want to tell you the reason. I've done 2 of these before with previous tenants. This is really, I didn't start out this way. I did it, but you'll see why in a minute. All parties agree that the sales price shall be colon. Okay. Because the thing is, if you buy it in year 1, okay, then it's going to be this price or this price or this price. But the same thing that can happen about the tenants that are appalled that you don't understand their emergency on December the 25th and why they can't pay their rent. It's the same for the people in here. They'll say, well, from 335 to 342, I paid like, I thought that you meant a year then. Well, you knew I was going to do it. I told you I just couldn't come up with it. Now it's specifically in writing. If you pay it by 11/30, this is the price. If you pay it on 12/1 or after, then it's this price. And so that way it's just spelled out. There's no hurt feelings, no conflict. It's just clearly in there that these are the pre-negotiated prices. Sure, would you have more in there about appraisals and all that? Of course, but that is something that I don't see, quite frankly, when people are turning in options, and that's what should be in there. And look, you can tell I am very clear about the rent in our initial meeting, of course. And, I mean, my message to tenants really is just don't stay if you can't pay, and I won't pursue you if the property's left plain. And so I do not give them the security deposit back, but y'all, nobody even asked for that. Heavens. I mean, they just left early. I mean, I don't care if somebody leaves like 4 months in, I'm not going to pursue them, but I still have got the turnkey time, which is usually a month's rent to get that out. Now is the time to confirm how many properties that you can have on your policy at your insurance company. So y'all, I used to be at a different insurance company, and then when I hit like 8 properties or it was below 10, but they said, oh, we don't hold more than that. And I'm like, well, this has been a total waste of time because I knew I was going to have a lot. And and now I have to cancel all of them and move them all to a different insurance company. So I have a good person at Liberty Mutual who's awesome on rates. If you don't have anybody, I'm happy to put his name up here. But umbrella policy, that's not even optional. I mean, y'all, I hope you have that as an agent anyway. But you've got to have this when you're a landlord, because you know what it does? It covers whatever your limit is on your landlord policy. It covers additional to that. It's usually $1 million policy. I'm just checking.
Michelle, is that a commercial insurance that you have, or is it just a regular homeowner's insurance?
You mean the umbrella policy?
The insurance overall on a rental?
Oh, so actually it's a lot cheaper than your homeowner's insurance. It is it's called landlord's insurance because you're not insuring what's in there. You're not insuring the content.
Okay.
And so I tell tenants to get renters insurance. And the reason that I want them to get renters insurance is because if anything did happen, I feel certain that somehow that would get blamed on me, or any landlord, whoever the landlord is. So and tenant insurance, renters insurance is super cheap. I mean, when I say super cheap, like less than $300 a lot of times. But by the way, that $700 a year umbrella policy, you can put all of your rental properties in there. You can put that, your car, like all these things that it'll cover you on if you, have an accident or somebody has an accident on your property.
Michelle, I'm so sorry to interrupt.
no,
I've got
please do.
2 questions.
Okay.
Do you make the renter's insurance mandatory?
I strongly encourage it, and I ask them for it. I ask them to send it to me. I've never had anyone not send it to me, but I will say this, I don't check on it the next year. Like if they don't leave, I don't say, hey, can you send me the updated policy? Because y'all, I mean, it's their stuff. You know what I mean? I mean, it's their stuff. And if they don't want to protect it, I mean, I don't
That's
want to
on
say
them.
not my problem, but I'm not their mom. I'm the landlord.
And then my second question is, what amount, or do you have any, I guess, set rule for security deposits in terms of what you ask for? Do you ask for first and last month? What is your rule on that?
I usually just ask for a 1 month rent. Just because, a lot of times we can't take more than, Derek, do you know how much it is? Is it 1.5 months when we're holding it as a real estate licensee?
For us, it's usually 1 month's rent. I think the most I've seen has been 2 months, but by vast majority is usually 1 month's rent.
And, maybe another consideration would be is if you gave them more time, like if you gave them some free time, like a free week or whatever, when they first moved in so that they could get moved in, that's something else that you could put at the end, that they would owe you if they terminated early. But the security deposit, if your rent was really cheap, like you had a quad and you were renting them for, $700 or $850 a piece, then maybe you want a little more, just because that's not enough to like get it repainted if they were in there, being crazy. But, we just have to think about really like, where does this put you on the scale of just saying, I mean, out of all the scary things that we talked about, there's just not, I hope that this is really, giving you a little peace, just knowing, yeah, look, y'all, this really was the way I spent New Year's Eve 2004. This was in with that subdivision Weatherstone on 92. This is one of those two houses I bought when when the Walmart was going up. But y'all, the funniest part, since I'm a girl, is like when you go over and they know, that you're the one that's going to be left with this, and they just don't care. They're just like, yeah, because that's what I said. I go, I mean, do you need anything in the garage? Because that's one thing you definitely want to say, just like you do on your regular contracts, if the seller's staying over, and you can't do the full, complete walkthrough before closing, is y'all, a lot of times people will leave stuff like this, and I mean, it was me. I mean, I just went in there and went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to the dumpster, taking all of that junk out so that I could, get a new tenant in the house. But this person, that they could come back, right? And oh, look at, is anybody like less than 25 and you don't know what this is? It's a fax machine. But there is we used to have those back in the day, but he could say that was his grandmother's fax machine right there, and that he cannot believe that I've thrown that away, and that he had actually used it as a savings account so that, so that if someone broke in, that they wouldn't know where he saved money. So he actually kept $5,000 in there as well. And I threw it away. So that's why you would have something in your lease, which I have, that says, whatever you leave. Okay. So when you're gone, anything in the house will be deemed trash. You agree that it's deemed trash, and it's the landlord's decision what to do with it from there. But if you don't have it in the lease agreement, that's how they come back and say, I had $5,000. I was coming back to get that fax machine. So, don't put yourself in that situation. The rules, and we talked about this a little yesterday on the sales meeting. These are just some of mine that I have for myself. One of the questions, a great question that came in on the sales meeting yesterday was, how do you ensure that people do not file like a fair housing claim against you, saying that I think I did not get the property because of this, protected class reason. And, one great thing that you'll do over time is what we went over before, just asking a lot of those questions and not meeting people until you think for sure that they're the people. That's one way. Another way is, y'all, instead of beating yourself up or saying it stinks being a landlord, I'm mad at Michele for talking me into it, instead of doing that, because it can be frustrating sometimes, like we were saying earlier, if 2 air conditioners break in a year, because that's expensive. However, there's sometimes that you just realize that you've been punked by somebody, because you just believed what somebody said and they just outright lied to you, or got one over on you, which is fine. Let it go. Don't judge yourself. Don't say you hate being a landlord. Remember, nobody's trying to convince you to love being a landlord, but what I know you will love is passive income. That's all we are being a landlord for, is passive income. So no executed lease, no key. Do you know why? So of course this has happened. All of my rules come from me making a mistake and paying a price that was just, irritating. So here's the thing. The reason that we need an executed lease before we give somebody a key is because if they never paid or gave you a fraudulent security deposit check, the only way that we can file for eviction is to prove a landlord-tenant relationship. And so that's one of the things I also have in my lease, is that anyone that lives at that house will be added, as added to the lease. Because here's the thing. What if 3 cousins live there? Okay. And then the cousin that had the good job, that's name is on the lease, she got a new boyfriend, they got engaged, and so she moved out to move in with him. So now there's 2 people living there and none of them are on your lease. They stopped paying rent without her. Do you know how hard it is to kick people out? That girl, the one that signed the lease, isn't even there anymore. guess when I found out that she had a fiance and moved out after the rent wasn't being paid. I didn't even know that was going on. If I had known, of course I would have said to put, to add the other people on. And I would have done a background check and everything else. But the thing is basically, what's convenient for us as landlords is to use one of those contractor boxes and just let people go in, so we don't have to drive over to show everybody the house. I would just encourage you, use those quick set that have the code on them. And that way you can use the code and you can just change the code later. But that way they don't have a key, and so one more thing is just certified funds for security deposit. I call that wire, so you just want to be sure that that goes through before you give somebody the key and sign the rent. I will tell you this, every time I've been the rules, I am so frustrated with myself and I pay for it every time. So now I just don't bet them anymore. I don't have that many, but when you learn something the hard way, you just don't want to have to learn that again because it stinks.
Michelle,
Yes,
I have
sir.
a question, please.
Hey, Eddie.
So my question is, this is perhaps going back a little bit, and I apologize for interrupting you doing your.
Oh, no. Listen, you got to, Eddie, because I can't see you, so I can't see if somebody's raising their hand or anything.
Okay, so can you give me some best practices versus, best practices on first and last month rent versus receiving the first month rent and the security deposit?
But here's the thing, Eddie, other people's money is other people's money. You can call it whatever you want to, but Gret calls it a security deposit if you're holding money that they can potentially get back. If you're holding other people's money, it's trust funds. So it doesn't matter what we call it. Even if we call it a pet deposit, it's still other people's money. So I don't think it really matters what you call it. I mean, the way that the judge looks at it is it's not yours. You're holding it for them. And by the way, just remember as a landlord, Solid Source has Genesis referrals, which is if you go to genesisreferrals.com, it's how tenants can deposit their earnest money. And it's where we hold, I say earnest money, and their security deposit, because Greg requires us to hold your security deposits. We set up Genesis referrals so that you'll see what the tenant has to check, but they are agreeing that we will return it to you and then you will return it to them. Because y'all, if we return it to the sender, then do you really think the tenant's going to send to you $1,100 for the damage of the $1,600 security deposit that they just got back from us? No. So that's why we set it up the way that we did, is so that we can help you as the landlord, give you back the money and then you give it to the tenant. But if we don't have the Genesis, if they don't go through Genesis, then we can't help with that. The holder is, has to look at who the sender was before dispersing. Definitely a repair request, return calls within 1 business day, and always have the repairman schedule with the tenant, because why would we be on a third party calling back and forth, back and forth, back and forth? I pick the repair person because I want to be sure they're competent, but then I just have them scheduled with the tenant. And so, this is so funny, y'all, people that don't understand, and most of us do just because we're, in this business as a real estate agent, but we cannot go in and evict someone, that is against the law. And we could actually be charged criminal charges. So we have to file a dispossessory. We cannot get it from them. This is on that website that I showed earlier. It's this is just these are different reasons that we can file a dispossessory and have tenants give tenants notice that they're going to have to leave if they don't comply with the rental payment schedule, if they refuse to pay or vacate, notice to quit. And so some of that is regarding a breach of the lease. Like, for instance, if you said that they could only have 2 dogs there and all of a sudden you went over there and there's 4 dogs there. And so you're saying, hey, I'm just, it's time for us to part ways because you saw the damage that those dogs did as puppies. Then, you can do it for that reason too. This is, you might want to take a picture of this. It's on, lawdistrict.com. I've got the website at the top. But this is a great website just as far as understanding eviction and having forms available that you can use. And remember, this is just as an, as an agent landlord, we wouldn't be doing this for other people, like clients, but it's really step by step, which I think makes it really easy. So the security deposit, real estate agents, and 10 rentals. Y'all, really the point of this slide is just so we're winding down our time together. If you still think that being a landlord, because you can tell why I talked about the money first, because sometimes when you start to hear stories of being a landlord, it's like, God, do I really want to take that on? And I would just ask you to change your perspective into, do I really want $10,000 a month before I wake up in the morning? Instead of saying, do I want to be a landlord? Say that, because that's what it does for you. And so the community association manager, salesperson who receives security deposits, they receive payments. And so this is really just saying, that it's got to be with your broker. Placement of security deposits, that does need to be in there, but this is in the genesisreferrals.com so that it does disclose that to the tenant. So you wouldn't have to go any further than that. And then, y'all, this is super important. Even though we would all do this for clients, would we do it when we are the client? We're our own client. It is the list of existing defects and damages. Here's the thing, we have to do that. Because if we do not write down a list of existing damaged items, then we cannot keep the security deposit to fix anything because we don't have anything showing that it was not broken before they got there. After 3 days, after the date of the termination of occupancy, the landlord can go and inspect and make a list of anything that the tenant damaged so that they can deliver notice that the tenant needs to pay, for the repairs. And then the tenant will have the right to inspect that form, and then they get 5 days to respond. And if the tenant abandons, all of these numbers at the top, you probably know, but these are all correct numbers, 44,733. If the tenant abandons, the landlord can make an inspection within a reasonable period of time. I will say that's always kind of a scary moment. I haven't had the app very many times. But you do want to be certain that you understand. That's the reason I put these numbers, so you could look at them as it's convenient to you and it's easy to look back on. But within 1 month after the lease termination, the landlord has to return the tenant security deposit. Like you can't say, well, you've been here for 5 years, so the place needs to be painted and that the tenant needs to pay for it. Okay, y'all, if we have tenants for 5 years, they need to be getting Christmas presents from us, hearing from us on their birthday. I mean, 5 years, same tenant. You didn't have to get any more tenants that have been completely invisible and low maintenance. I mean, just heavens. We certainly don't want to say they need to pay for paint when they leave, because even if they didn't damage the walls, I mean, the walls, when they move their furniture after 5 years, I mean, you're going to be able to see stuff on it. You may need to paint, but that's not them. And then just notice the way that this interchange goes back and forth. Then the tenant can disagree, give it to the landlord can respond, but all of these have deadlines on them. And if you miss one, then it doesn't start back up. Like you can't say, oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. That's like saying, hey, I'm sorry, I terminated after due diligence. It's just like, yeah, I'm sorry, your client lost the earnest money too, but if tenant cannot be located after 90 days, the security deposit becomes the property of the landlord. Remedies and noncompliance. The landlord should not be entitled to retain any portion of security deposit if the security deposit was not deposited in an escrow account, which y'all never have to worry about because they are all deposited there at Solid Source. And then any landlord who fails to return any part of the security deposit, which is required to be returned to the tenant, shall be liable to the tenant in the amount of 3 times the sum improperly withheld. Y'all, I hate that so much, but it's all because we're licensees. So that's why I put that up there, just so you could look at it. So y'all, our time is coming to an end. So I'm going to open the floor up for questions, but I just like to end on a good note. So depreciation is my favorite because it's usually a delightful surprise to everyone. And so we're talking about recapture. So when the property that's been depreciated is sold, even if it's only depreciated for 10 years, you've still got that recapture rate. And so, you can just get the money and then just pay the government if you want to, or you can do a 1031 tax-free exchange. So up to 5 properties must be identified within 45 days of the closing of that date where you're making that money. And then the money held by the intermediary. So once that property closes, that's going to be the down payment on the other properties. Then an intermediary has to hold that. So that's somebody different from your closing attorney. And so I just like to say, when you look at this selling one property, if you made $80,000, you identified up to 5 properties within 45 days. In the closing of your sale, you've got to write, remember to write in the contract, all parties acknowledge that the sale of this property is part of a 1031 tax-free exchange. That needs to be in the contract special stipulations when you make the offer, or at least by the time that you're making the final clean copy. And so, when you're looking at what you can do with this tax-free money, because y'all, I mean, if we paid taxes on the 80, then what would we be paying? Like $35,000? Okay. We get to keep the whole thing if we're just rolling it into new investment property. So even though you do have to recapture the gain, you can still use the 1031 tax-free exchange and not pay taxes on it. The problem is if you mess up and you touch that money, and when I say touch, I mean it lands in your bank account, even if it was a mistake by the attorney, then a lot of times that triggers a taxable event and you can't go backward. There is a reverse 1031 tax-free exchange, not in this class, but it is available. But the sale of the 1031 property is called boot, and that boot is what you pay tax on, along with any other depreciation that you've already written off. And so when you look at this and you say, okay, here's the capital gain, this is where I would be. Look at the tax time if you made $100,000 this year in 10 rentals, this is breaking it down like how we got that $11,000. And so this is, 10 rentals, but these rentals were only $125,000. And so look at, even if you made 50,000, like your spouse has a day job or, brings in the majority of income, regardless of what it is, I guess the point is just whether you make 50,000, whether you make 100,000, why would we pay more in taxes than we need to? And why would we not allow people to pay our houses off, and pay our mortgage off and let us live, debt-free and financial freedom?